You're live.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the Curriculum Subcommittee meeting this afternoon. We have quite a lot of people here, and I'm going to ask Ben Lummis to read down the list and identify who all of these people are. So, Ben, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you, Robin. Robin Coyne is, thank you, Barbara. Robin Coyne is the school committee secretary. Alicia Mitchell is our K-12 coordinator for visual arts. And Theus is somebody else. Really, Antheus, sorry. Anthony Meyer is our principal of the...
I'm sorry, Ann is from BIG.
Sorry, Ann's from BIG, thank you, from Brookline Interactive Group. Anthony Meyer is our principal of the high school. Asa Sibelius is our principal of the Heath School. Barbara Scotto, our school committee member and chair of the curriculum subcommittee. We have Carlin Unayama. Thank you, sorry. Who is our K-12 coordinator of wellness. Casey No Miller, deputy superintendent of student services. David Perlman, school committee member. Emily Speck, our K-8 science coordinator. Gabe McCormick, our K-8 social studies coordinator. Al Mason, our associate headmaster at the high school. Ellen Charlupsky, school committee member. Jen Buller, principal of the Coolidge Corner School. Jennifer Monopoly, school committee member. Julie Shiner Oldham, school committee member and chair of the school committee. Khalees Wernham, Senior Director of Educational Equity. Kathleen Hubbard, our K-8 coordinator for mathematics. Kenny Kozel, our K-12 coordinator for performing arts. Mary Litaz, our coordinator of guidance and counseling services. Marian Boros, teacher at the Runkle School. Mary Brown, our senior director of teaching and learning. Matt Dubois, psychologist at the high school. Meg Massini, our senior director of programs. Melissa Devine, gonna be a tough one. Director of special education and RISE, and a few other things. Michelle Herman, our director of professional development. Nicole Gittens, deputy superintendent of teaching and learning. Norma Gordon, system-wise math specialist and coach. Sharon Abramovitz, our school committee member. Suzanne Fetterspiel, school committee member and vice chair of the school committee. Susan Wolf Ditkoff, school committee member. Tanya Alvarado, K-8 coordinator for world languages. Teresa Gallo-Toth, librarian at the Runkle School. And I'm Ben Lummis, interim superintendent. And that was pretty impressive, I think.
That was indeed. Thank you very much, Ben. We are going to do this way. We are going to start with a presentation that Nicole Gittens has. And when she is finished, we are going to go to questions and comments, many of which have been sent to us online, and there will be people adding as well. So Nicole, are you ready to begin?
Give me 1 second to get that up on my screen.
I'll start the presentation and then hand it off to Nicole while she is getting ready to share the presentation so everyone can see it. Oh. Great. All right. So, Nicole, we'll give you an update on the long-term remote learning guidance and plan. Nicole, can you switch to the next slide, please? So this presentation and this update and the work today will be going over a three-part update for the curriculum subcommittee. Those three parts are what is happening now in our classrooms. We have principals and coordinators on the line to help us understand what's really going on in our schools and some of the incredible work that's happening across all of our schools. I will share some new guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which is new since our last school committee meeting a week ago, which is that plus the work agreement between the school committee and the BEU and Brookline sort of norms and values are guiding the remote learning plan, and then Nicole will will provide us an update on the remote learning plan, including really focusing specifically on the new guidance that we will be sharing with our teachers in the coming days, and really we'll summarize what we're working on across a number of slides. So let's get into number one here. If you can go to the next slide, please, Nicole. So we have a bunch of folks on the line here, and don't need to hear from everybody, but certainly appreciate everyone's coming and their interest. All of our staff here. We have just a tremendous, as you heard earlier, representation from incredibly accomplished and experienced group here. So I'd like to start off with Asa from the Heath School, Anthony Meyer, Hal Mason from Brookline High School, then Gabe McCormick, our KD Social Studies Curriculum Coordinator, and then Kathleen Hubbard, who I think may be on the line, but I'm not sure, a Math Curriculum Coordinator. I know Torrance wasn't able to get in, and Kathleen may not be here. So after we hear from Gabe, well, I'd like to open up to a couple more people, but just want to be conscious of time here. But let's start with Asa. If you can help us understand sort of the work that you see teachers doing, how they're working together, and what they're providing, some examples of what you've seen them provide for students and families, please.
Okay, so today, for example, my day looked like 2 planning meetings with teacher teams. I joined a read aloud that happens 3 times a week by our early childhood literacy coach, Kristen Wheeler, and I joined a 1st grade morning meeting. All of our teams, K through 5, are doing horizontal planning. That means that the whole team is aligned. And even though each teacher has their own website, they are co-planning every week, multiple times a week, so that everybody's sending the same message at Heath, and that's K through 5. In middle school, we do have a once a week middle school team meeting that's joined by about 20 people. And we've built a landing page for our parents so they can see what's expected 6th grade across the day. And we've given time, tentative times, what a typical day could look like for a 6th grader, 7th grader, and an 8th grader. And then we have also our wellness team, psychologists and guidance who are working very closely with teachers to make sure that they're adding social emotional learning. All of our specialists are on board. So I think everybody's really super active, which is great and very aligned. And all of our coaches are also activated. Our literacy and math specialists have also started, and this week are launching intervention groups. We're not doing one-on-one work because I think my philosophy right now is that we're trying out a lot of this tech and we need to make sure everyone's safe. Kids are safe, teachers are safe, and we just want to make sure everything's, all the clearances are met. But we're doing larger group interventions and doing a lot of invitations for special ed, general ed interventions, and so on. So we're firing as much as possible. It can be quite messy, but at the same time, the final product is quite lovely. And our parents are having a really strong response. I've only heard positive things. And when a parent comes forward with a concern or a quandary or a confusion, the team really super activates and helps them.
Thank you, Asa.
Comes forward with a concern or a quandary or a confusion, the team really super activates and helps them.
Sorry, are you guys waiting for me at this point?
Yes, sorry, Anthony. Yeah, if you could go ahead, that'd be great.
Great.
Asa, thank you very, very much. That was very helpful and painted a great picture. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Asa. That's terrific work. This is Anthony Meyer, and it's strange to talk to people while looking at a big slide and not your faces. But I will speak to sort of the larger vision of the high school during this time of unprecedented school closure, and then Hal will complement by talking about our United Mind Workers approach that we've used over the last couple of weeks. So just to refresh people, and I think we're all very, very aware of this, but We've been out since Friday the 13th, and I would just talk about a phased approach at Brookline High School, and likely that was district-wide as we responded to COVID-19. So that initial stage was a bridge stage from the 13th through the 20th. And that is when we were trying to remain connected with kids. We focused sort of on 3 values: connection, engagement, and adjustment. And so trying as much as possible to remain in contact with families, educators, student support people, reaching out, Hal and me, to students and to families while negotiations were happening and agreements, and we were looking for guidance from DESE, hearing some and not hearing others, but working through the 20th, connecting with students. Then we launched on the 23rd, the United Mind Workers approach, which Hal can describe, and then Hal, I'll jump back into some planning beyond that.
Sure, thanks, Anthony. So what we decided is, after a lot of conversation with our curriculum coordinators, is that we needed to have a central architecture, a central landing place for kids. That even though the majority of our teachers use Canvas, not everyone does in not every class, and we wanted to have one location where kids, families could look and click and get directly to, in almost all cases, linked Google Docs that contain the assignments. And since we weren't going to individual teachers doing assignments, it was more of a collaborative by department model that we were going with. And so the Google Doc in this case worked really well. In some cases, they were referring to individual things that might happen in some singleton or classes where there's only 1 or 2 sections. But for most kids in most classes, they saw what is the common assignment that was given from the wellness department, the common assignment that was given for the 9th grade math classes. And so that central landing place, the UMW site, allowed everybody to find things really quickly and have it all in the one place.
And so thanks, Hal. That's well articulated. As you can imagine, in a world in which over the last couple of weeks where we've been pretty explicit that the work that students are doing is not earning credit explicitly, we've had that plus COVID-19, we've had a mix of engagement, and that's something that we are of course concerned about. And like the rest of the district, we have a really awesome group of student support people and really dedicated educators. And we're trying to figure out what are the nets and the supports that we need to articulate, that we need to create in order to figure out who's not engaging, who's not literally connecting digitally, and do that then mundane, methodical, essential work of finding those students and figuring out how we support them. And so, when I spoke about adjustment, this is largely about thinking about our most vulnerable families. Many of those we know, many we don't yet, who will become vulnerable due to COVID-19. And so figuring out how to create those dynamic structures as we, and now this is an important shift, we are going to, like the rest of the district, follow DESE guidance. We see students earning credit moving forward. And on April 6th, Monday, we will be explicit about that. Again, we'll be following DESE guidance around credit and no credit, and both establishing structures of school, i.e. grades and grading timelines and so on, but doing so very, very carefully within this context. Again, following DESE guidance. So there will be a shift in how we've been operating on that side. Our educators have worked incredibly hard on content and connections and figuring out instruction. And now, we're excited about the work they're going to do. We also need a great deal of flexibility, as DESE makes very explicit, for how educators are going to deliver some new content and emphasize really important skills and content that students have already learned. So I think I'll pause there. because we've talked long enough. Certainly I have.
Asa, do you have something to add? Then I want to give it over to Gabe. Go ahead, Asa.
So in the vein, to follow up on what Anthony was saying, we too, Keith, are gathering up all the data on where are the kids, what are they doing, and then also gathering the data on what percentage of assignments they complete, which assignments they complete. And so we're trying to track all of that data too. And so we have a lot of mechanisms. I know Coolidge Corner does as well. So all of that kind of data gathering is happening in real time as well. So I just wanted to say at K-8, that's happening too.
And that's in order to identify which students are engaging and support those that may not be, or connect with those that may not be. Thank you, Asa.
Yeah.
Can you help folks understand a little bit about what you see in terms of social studies teachers, collaborating and working across the district?
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably the clearest picture is that just like Anthony and Asa were describing with students, across the 20 middle grade social studies teachers, right, we just have a range of experiences. There's some folks in a position like mine where I have no kids and I, have a great deal of flexibility. And then we have folks who are teachers who are single parents of kids with some very specific needs, and everything in between. Right? Some folks caring for adult family members or parents. And so what I'm trying to do is help support the range of teachers and the range of their circumstances by encouraging flexibility. I'm definitely encouraging collaboration as long as it's kind of useful and reasonable for them. I think one of the key things is that just because of different experiences at schools, like some schools, their grade level team, like at 7th grade, is really collaborative. And so that social studies teacher might be working really closely with their 7th grade team. And so I don't want to, disrupt what that school's approach is by trying to, get all 15 7th grade social studies teachers to try and collaborate. And so really trying to balance like being supportive and making sure that like the time that social studies teachers are with me and are together is really to their benefit from their perspective, while finding out other individual ways to support folks that might be doing a more specific school-based approach. And so my experience has been sort of a combination of like team meetings, sort of grade level specific office hours, and then a bunch of like one-on-one triage. And part of that is also due to just like the range of folks' flexibility being online, as Anthony described. Some folks were already on Canvas, and so they have a really, typical mechanism for communicating with families and students, and then others are trying to figure that out from the ground up or trying to do it all over email, and it's just different. And so I'm trying to almost be like a Swiss Army knife and like differentiate for whatever folks need.
Thank you, Gabe. And then Kathleen, what are you seeing in terms of collaboration across teachers, among teachers, and then also if you see any examples that you know of in terms of the type of work and opportunities and engagement that students are doing?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I would echo a lot of what has been said already. The 6 to 8 team, Norma Gordon, who's also on this call, has set up kind of a landing page for collaboration. And we've met once as a group, all 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers together. And now each team has set up their own weekly 6th grade meeting, 7th grade meeting, and 8th grade meeting. And then on that landing page, there's a place for them to share assignments that they're coming up with, projects that they're coming up with their teams within their building, based on the core curriculum that we're using. So there's a kind of a virtual collaboration happening. And I'd echo that, the way that people are participating and sharing depends on what their lives look like at home right now, given all of the conflicting demands of just this situation. Some teachers are sending out assignments at the beginning of the week and then having some optional check-in times. Some have found that a whole group, short amount of time with a whole group has been effective with their students, and others are finding offering several small group sessions is easier to connect with teachers with students more directly. So there's a variety of ways that teachers are reaching out. Some are using Google Classroom. Many are using Canvas. Some are communicating out through email and then following up later in the week. And some are using the school-based websites that have been developed. Again, some teams across content areas within the building are coming up with projects. That depends on the building. A lot of just well-being checks at this point, making sure that they're hearing from students, noticing who they're not hearing from, and wanting to follow up on that. And then generally wanting to be on the same page with, if we're going into new content, what is that? So that as much as possible, while honoring teacher autonomy, we can try to be providing a consistent as possible experience for students, especially thinking about in 8th grade, where they'll be eventually transitioning to the high school, making sure we can have some agreement about what the experiences that we're putting out for students. I mean, at this point, they're trying to gather feedback about what's working for their students, what's working for their families, so that we can make adjustments as we go. And in terms of K-5, we've been meeting as a math specialist team weekly and sharing resources. I'm trying not to communicate myself directly with K-5 teachers because they have a lot going on within their buildings and with their specialists, but making sure that we're available to field questions as needed.
Thank you, Kathleen. So I wanted to have a moment for maybe a couple of questions from school committee members, and perhaps if folks who haven't spoken yet, whether it's a principal, Jen or others, or a coordinator, if it can be directed to them, that might be helpful. But any couple of quick questions here from school committee members? See, Helen.
So I have two questions that from the presentations that have been happening. Kathleen, you said something about following up with kids who are not engaged, and I think Anthony actually mentioned that too. Is there somebody who's responsible for that? How do we know that it happens?
So Jen or Asa or Kathleen, can you take that? Yeah, Jen, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me? So at CCS, what's been going on is I meet with my school support team, which is a combination of all the guidance counselors, school psychologists, nurses, and vice principals and myself. And we gather all the information from the grade level teams and other people about where they are, what students are engaging with what, and then we kind of take it from there and then feed back to the teachers what we're finding. So, today I worked on, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry, you take it from there. I wasn't sure what that meant. Go ahead.
Yep. So then I've been working with the police department. We've been working with Brookline Mental Health. We've been working with the social worker who works at the Egmont Trustman building to try and track down and communicate and get a sense of what the family needs are and how we can meet them as a school. And if we can't meet them as a school, what's the best local agency that we can connect that family with in order to meet their needs?
That's fantastic. that sounds really well organized. Thank you. And my second question, if I can, Anthony, you talked about what's happening overall in the school, but you didn't mention the specialized programs. Are they doing the same thing? Like there's 3 or 4 at least at the high school. How are they accessing the students and helping the students to continue with their learning?
Sure. So I think absolutely we have a broad plan for 2,080 kids, and then we need highly specialized plans and support for specific kids. And so that can be, SWS continuing to find ways to hold town meetings. And as small as that might seem, that's a way of fostering community. I am delivering iPads to RISE paraprofessionals so that they can continue to engage with students and families from afar. I'm now telling you very specific things, like I'm carrying a walker in the back of my car that I picked up in a classroom in order to get that to a family who needs that. Casey, it looks like you have maybe a couple of additions as well on program specific.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Matt Dubois is actually here, so he can speak to some other supports provided to higher needs populations.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm a psychologist at the high school, and my primary role is I co-coordinate a therapeutic program, the Supported Learning Center. And so our program serves 25 kids, and to give some examples to sort of build off of what Anthony said, is so we have pretty routine contact with all of our kids and all of our families. So for example, this week we've been able to hold video chats with 22 of our 25 kids individually. And then we also do twice a week, we do group sessions where we invite all of our kids to come together for a group chat just for community building. Our most recent one was yesterday, and we had 17 of our 25 kids join that video chat. For the 3 remaining kids, we've had 2 additional phone calls, then 1 phone call with the parents. That kid has some more intense family-based needs that made them more unavailable for doing video chats during the day. But what our big focus right now with our kids is we're working with a population who entered this period of time already pretty anxious, already experiencing levels of depression. And so it's really supporting kids socially and emotionally so that they can approach academic work in a meaningful way, and to make sure that they're having their more fundamental and basic needs met during this time.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you're doing.
Great. And then I think, Julie, I thought you might have a question.
I do. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for everyone for all of the hard work and all of the planning and thought and care that's going into everything that has been happening. We know how much is going on behind the scenes to make it, to make it happen under these circumstances, and it's really appreciated by the school committee. And I speak as a parent of kids who are really benefiting from engaging with the teachers and seeing the plans roll out. And so thank you. I just wanted to start by saying thank you. And I'm wondering, as we're making making plans, as we have teachers who are finding that that they're not able to engage at the level that we would hope because of circumstances that might be going on at home, or because of, if anyone is getting ill or they're caring for someone that's ill, what structures and plans do we have in place to support the children in those classes so that we have an equity of experience that's happening? If we had the students that are going into school every day, there are different sorts of structures that are in place. In this sort of situation, if we have a teacher who's not able to participate in that same level, you could have students that are receiving very little or no support. And what are we doing in those situations?
Like Jen, I'm just looking for hands from folks. If you want to speak, just raise your hand. I'm just looking for hands. Yeah, good, Jen.
So I could give you some CCS specific examples. So we haven't had a situation yet where a classroom teacher has needed some additional support, but what we've been encouraging is that for all of our grade level teams to work together as a team to develop different activities and content. And they have included in all of their digital platforms myself, the vice principal, and our educational technology specialist as co-teachers in their classes, so that if they were to fall ill or not be able to meet the needs of their students, that one of us in that moment could take over and help push the activities and interact with students. We had an instance where we had a meeting and a support staff wasn't able to provide service or connect with a student who was needing to connect. And so that grade level vice principal jumped in to fulfill that need. And so I think because everybody is in tight communication at CCS right now, we're able to meet that need.
Hey, Anthony, yep.
Similar to what Jen described at the high school, the key people for teachers in particular at the high school are the department heads or curriculum coordinators. And so we're just making very explicit to staff to communicate to curriculum coordinators and any school leaders if you need additional support. And as Jen said, it is, we already think it's good to have a team approach in order to make sure there's a level of consistency that kids deserve. And I think it's also important in terms of supporting staff and making adjustments when need be. So just agreeing with Jen that we're trying to support staff members and colleagues as they're affected.
Great.
follow up to that, do we have longer term plans so that if we had a teacher, a third grade teacher, for example, who because of circumstances is going to be out for the remainder of the year, what would happen in that place? Would we have a substitute teacher? Would those students get absorbed into the other classes in third grade? How do we envision that working?
I think it's an area that we aren't quite there yet on, honestly. I think finding a substitute or absorbing it would be difficult in this time because that person won't have those relationships. And at this point, it's those relationships between staff and students which are really making it happen. Without those, it's a much harder prospect. I think another challenge is so it's hard to substitute, right? But also another difficult challenge is very hard for a classroom teacher, say a fourth grade teacher, to take on additional students. So I think it's a place that we probably need to continue to work on. I don't know. Principals, if you have maybe experiences so far, but I know we also have some leave coming up, that sort of thing, planned leaves, I mean. So Anthony, I see your hands up.
Just quickly, I've already talked too much. I would just say that the district has been supportive where there's been a need. So we had a long time incredible social worker leave us at the middle of the year. And it took a while to run the process to hire someone, but we're in the process of bringing a social worker on board at the high school, recognizing what was just stated. There's not the relationship. Ben just said there wouldn't be the relationship. And we think it's really important to have that kind of critical person step in and substitute and work with kids and families. So my hope is, and my belief is that we'll find a way if we need to shift and hire people and get them on board. That's my sense. That has been my sense from Ben and Mary Ellen and Lisa Richardson in HR.
Yes, Susan.
Thank you. And I just want to
go ahead, Susan and Suzanne.
Okay. First of all, echo my thanks to you, to your teams for your dedication and commitment and creativity. Certainly when we thought this was a 2-week exercise or even a 3-week exercise, the goal was get this up and running. As many of you have said, just try to get this happening and work out some kinks. To the extent that, as I think about this, this is not a school committee decision, but I can't imagine we're going back to school this year. I think that's what, a lot of people also believe who are public health professionals. And I'm starting to hear people say we might not be going back in September. Universities might not be opening in September. And so I just want to make sure that as we have the next part of this conversation, before we get to the next part of the conversation, what I'd love to think a little bit about is that, let a thousand flowers bloom made a lot of sense in a 2 to 3 week period. Whatever platform the teachers felt comfortable with at the school that the school district was supporting, if it's email, if it's the website, other thing, Canvas. But it also means that kids are having to go to multiple different places to try to figure out how their educators wants to communicate them. So I guess my question is, as you think about the things that maybe worked for 2 or 3 weeks, but are priorities for you to figure out if this is going to be a 3-month exercise, which is a third of the school year, and potentially going into the fall, where are those pressure points where you say, yeah, we could have just gotten through it for 2 weeks, but if we're talking about a third of the school year, here are some of the things that we're running up against that we really have to solve. And I think, that was a great example, just to build on where Julie was going and Ben was going, and some of you about backup teachers. There is zero chance that we won't have leaves, right? Just health related or planned or whatever it is. So that's one, but what are some of those other pressure points that you would say, wow, we really need to figure some of this out? For some of them are obvious, like making sure that kids don't, making sure that there's meaningful educational advancement, meaningful feedback, meaningful special education services, minimizing learning loss. And I can guess a bunch, but I guess from your point of view, both your vision, but also just sort of operationally, like what stuff are you I don't say worry about, what's on your mind that we would really need to kind of think about based on the experience you've had so far?
Sorry, Suzanne, I missed you earlier. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, there you go.
So, did anybody want to respond to Susan, or have you moved on? You just, okay.
I would.
Yeah. I can tell you, and this is part of the presentation that we'll get to this part in the bigger presentation. But I can tell you that what we're really focusing on is how do we consistently communicate with families on updated guidance and any changes that happen, scheduling consistent support for teachers with curriculum coordinators so that we are having a more seamless and consistent experience across the district and at least across schools. Working with principals to develop contingency plans for teachers who are unavailable, continue to develop the work that's already underway with students with disabilities, developing an FAQ page so that parents have a place to get answers that are commonly asked, and work with teachers to adjust plans as needed, because we are, like you said, at first everyone's just doing what they can do. And now we're having to think about how to organize ourselves better. And then how do we get teacher voice to be a part of what it is that's happening, so that what's happening on the ground is really what they see and need to happen. And so those are like, when we're thinking about the next steps that we need to engage in, those are like immediate next steps. And as things continue to evolve, we'll start to see more and more things that need to be addressed. And so I think I'll stop there.
And I think Kenny, go ahead, Kenny.
Great. So Susan had asked, what are some of the things on our mind? And I will tell you, one of the things that we've talked a lot about from the perspective of the arts, music, also a bit with wellness education and some other areas, are that some of our classes, how do you run a band if you don't have the band all meeting together? How do you run a ceramics class if you don't have clay in front of you? But our teachers have been doing a great job at really finding ways to put out offerings for students to engage in the arts. And I would just push us as we ramp up what might be more directed learning to not let the arts fall behind. This is a time where we need to think as much, if not more than ever, about the holistic education that all of our students need. And I fear that in some of the conversations, some of what are referred to sometimes as specials or electives they're certainly not being forgotten about. They are definitely been a part of all of the curriculum coordinator meetings that I've been at. I see our teams working both at their school levels, across different disciplines. They're working within our departments. But I do caution us to not let it become secondary. One thing that I think many of us saw in the first couple weeks of this was parents across the nation trying to figure out schedules for their kids. Before we even got to it as school systems, I think this collectively as many school systems, I saw a lot of things going on social media where parents were creating time for wellness for their kids on a daily basis, visual arts on a daily basis, music on a daily basis. And they were looking for creative ways to do this. Now, that might not replace what we want to do as a school system, but what it said to me is that when you put education in the hands of the parents to decide what is important for their children, they recognize that we should be doing the arts on a daily basis. I kind of look at it as it's like we should do it like brushing our teeth, every day. So I would just encourage us, and again, Susan, you said, what's on our minds? It's on our minds not to let this fall as secondary to what are traditionally called the academic subjects. I don't totally agree with the term. I think our subjects are also very academic, but I do think that they serve a part of the wellness of our students in their mental health, and so do other subject areas. I'm not saying just our subjects, but I think that it's something that we should really be embracing as our students are facing so many new challenges and isolation and all this other.
Thank you, Kenny. And I'll just say one thing, which is as as we show what the revised guidance will be, I think folks will see, building on what Kenny said. I'm specifically thinking K-8 here. That's one of the, as Kenny said, also our art and music teachers across the district have been very engaged in providing resources and materials and programs and opportunities so far. And we also need to make sure they're fully engaged with students, because it is something that can happen every day, should happen every day, whether that's wellness or visual arts or music. And certainly folks are doing it, but we do also need to round that out. So I think that's a point really well taken. Thank you, Kenny. Suzanne, let's just finish with you and then we can continue on. Sorry for waiting.
Thank you. I think today is Paraprofessional Appreciation Day. So I want to say thank you to all paraprofessionals who may be out there, and thank you for your hard work. And that actually is my question. Are we providing what they need to do the work that we are asking them to do, and kind of what role are they playing? So this would be both early childhood, general ed, and special education paraprofessionals, and how are they interacting with our students and teachers?
Jen, maybe if you could talk about just how it's happening from a principal's perspective and what you're seeing at a school level. And then I know Casey and Nicole have been working more on a district-wide level as well. And then give an update on their work, please.
Sure. So we are feathering in our paraprofessionals where we can and where they are able to participate. A lot of our early childhood K-1 paraprofessionals are sitting in on morning meetings, interacting with students through a virtual morning meeting, or leading a story in a morning meeting, just as they would in the classroom setting. And then for our special education paraprofessionals, I don't think we have activated them as much as our early childhood paraprofessionals at that point. And that's a conversation that we've been having with all of our special educators about how do we use them. Just as Asa had said at the beginning, we want to make sure everybody is safe. So how typically, if a student had a one-to-one, how do we, if we're providing one-to-one, we have a lot of questions about how to use our special education paraprofessionals. And I know Casey and her team are working really hard on that. So I'll let her talk about the special education side.
Thanks, Jen. So I can speak to the special education paras, but also discussions that Nicole and I have both had too about how to use general education paraprofessionals, and to some extent having special education para support in general ed too. So we've had some requests from special education teachers for para support during instructional groups, virtual instructional groups, by way of breakout rooms, and take smaller groups so that they can work on more targeted skills. So we are in the process of identifying which teachers need that paraprofessional support, and then finding out whether or not the para needs a laptop in order to do that work, and then finding out from them which general educators also would like some paraprofessional support for the same purpose, instructional, to run smaller instructional groups. The thing that Nicole and I talked about was potentially providing professional development on running small reading groups, guided reading groups, anything math related. Nicole and I talked about it just yesterday afternoon. If we have interest from paraprofessionals to help run those small groups under the supervision of a general educator, then we would provide them with the professional development and the technology if needed, so that we can activate them, to use Jen's word. I don't remember if this was Julie's or Suzanne's question, but does that help at all?
Yeah, that was my question, Casey.
Yeah,
Suzanne.
Yeah, very
so I
much in process right now because we wanted to get info out to special education staff, teachers first in order to get them thinking about their work in the coming weeks and months. And then this was the week that we were really able to start thinking about how to activate all of our paras.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're a tremendous resource for us and for our children, our students. So Ben, I would just suggest if perhaps we need to find out if they need laptops or hardware or Chromebooks so that they could then connect that way with the students.
Yeah,
that'd be helpful.
Yes, Suzanne, we totally agree with you on that. And that's actually was a focus of one of the principal calls a couple of days ago. And that's part of the work that Casey and Nicole are doing is to identify, where, who, where, which ones, that sort of stuff. But yeah, there is a need for that, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the time because we have 2 hours for the meeting and don't want to run over. David, how about if we wrap up with you in this section and then go to continue the presentation? Is that okay?
Sure. And perhaps you're going to be addressing this later on in the presentation, but I have a question a bit more specific as to the curriculum and in terms of the approach. Are you looking at the provision of resources and online education as an attempt to mimic as much as possible what would be occurring in the physical classroom, or are you looking to reconfigure the curriculum so that it's different from what already would have been provided otherwise?
So let me just chime in on this because I think we'll answer that to some degree later. Excuse me. And that really gets to the idea of new learning and new content, which is we started out, the state started out a couple weeks ago as really focusing on enrichment, deeper learning, and not zeroing in on new learning or new content, new skills. I'll talk about the recommendations from the Commissioner of Education in a moment. So that's an area that we are now getting into. So I want to hold the question a little bit till we share some of what we're thinking and the way we're thinking about it. Because there are real questions about equity and access there, but we think we have some guidelines and some recommendations that'll help our staff do that well. So I'm going to pause on that, David, if that's okay. So Nicole, if you can bring up the presentation again, please. And slide 4, please. Thank you. So I'm just going to give a quick update on what's changed in the world in terms of, at least in terms of the state education landscape and how that affects us just quickly. And then Nicole, take it from there and start sharing the sort of real summary of where our guidance and our remote learning plan is really going. So I think the same day that we had our last school committee meeting, the governor announced that the school closure would extend until at least May 4th. As folks have said, we're anticipating that it may go longer, and as we continue to plan and adjust and develop, that's that's how we're thinking. The guidance from Education Commissioner Jeff Riley was released about a week ago, or less than a week ago, I guess. And it's important to know that those recommendations have been endorsed by not only the Association of School Committees, but also Association of School Superintendents and the 2 teachers unions. That is a pretty rare occurrence, very honestly, that those 4 groups and all the folks that they represent come together on a set of anything. So it's guidance that's well regarded and well taken care of and well considered. And schools and districts around the Commonwealth, including Brookline, need to weigh it heavily and consider it strongly. And I think we're doing that in alignment. So if you just go to the next slide, please, Nicole. So a few things, the highlights. These are directly from the Commissioner's recommendations. They're not all of them. People should, as we shared these recommendations with our staff and also with families on Monday morning. And so folks should look at them. I think they're very instructive and they're also help, I think, much in alignment with the school committee BEU work agreement. So first and foremost, the commissioners reiterated, and I think we all agree, that the safety and well-being of students is the top priority. Students, families, and of course our staff. We are all suffering together in a challenge we haven't experienced before, and that has to and must remain our top priority. And because of that, we have a lot of flexibility and adjustments we have to allow for, which we've been talking about already today. Another part of that, the well-being of our students, is certainly the connections between our staff and our students. And that is through many, many ways that folks have described today, particularly for our most vulnerable members. And I hope you've heard what we're already doing to keep track of, pay attention to, connect with our students every day across the district. And then also what happens if we identify kids who aren't engaging for any reasons, and how we are working to make sure that we're paying attention to them and supporting them and figuring out how we can support them. There's a real strong acknowledgement, I think, from us, and I think really, I hope from the school committee as well, which you've talked about, which is that nothing we're doing now will compare to or really raise the bar of the in-person schooling experience. There is a reason we have school buildings and school classrooms, and there's a reason we bring together every single day of the school year our teachers and our students and our support staff and our paraprofessionals, because in front of them, working together in our classrooms, around a table, around a desk, on a mat, on a room carpet, in reading groups, and in so many different ways, that is the best thing. And we are doing our best to provide learning experiences, and but we won't raise to that bar. Another thing that the commissioner talked about is meaningful and productive learning opportunities. It's important for us to engage them. That's our obligation. And also, equity needs to be a top consideration as we plan forward. And that's because of the acknowledgement and the understanding we all share, that this sort of crisis disproportionately affects our most vulnerable students. Sorry, Nicole, can you go to the next slide, please? The commissioner also talked about some very clear recommendations on remote learning. He was clear in saying remote learning is not synonymous with online learning, and also that remote learning can take place in a multitude of ways. He talked about and was very clear about the idea of educator-directed learning as well as student self-directed learning. And so when he also talks about, as it says in the next bullet, that we should be expecting to and aiming to provide meaningful and productive learning for approximately half the length of the school day, or a regular school day. And also, that's a combination of educator-directed learning and self-directed learning, meaning it couldn't possibly be 3 hours or more of teachers on a screen with students, leading lessons, lecturing, engaging them. First of all, being on a screen for that much a day isn't healthy, and isn't actually the best learning that can happen. So you'll see in our new guidance, we have taken that to heart, and we are providing examples and samples and templates for folks on what that learning week really can be for students, and also the learning day for students, but also to give guidance for our teachers, how they can collaborate to create that day for students, which is both, again, educator-directed and student self-directed. On the idea of schools focus on reinforcing skills already taught in the school year and applying and deepening these skills. The commissioner was also very clear that at the high school level, this may be different. And Nicole will help you understand how we're thinking about the new learning that Mr. Perlman asked about, and what we can do, not only for deepening and applying existing skills, but how we may be able to also provide new content while using that new content with existing skills or deepening existing skills. And the last couple pieces to address the idea that especially if you think of a K-5 or a high school, that it's appropriate for all of it to fall on a teacher. Okay, that we want to connect with students multiple times per week, but that can't be just one person doing that all the time. That we need a team approach to make sure kids are being connected with, day in, day out, but not always by the same person. And then the last piece that I think was different from what people were expecting was the idea of teachers providing feedback on student work completed at home to the extent practicable. I think that is a couple things there. It's providing feedback as opposed to grades. It's acknowledging that students will have a different level of being able to complete work or engage work depending on their family situation. and also acknowledging that teachers have quite a varied ability to respond to all student work. Okay? So feedback is important on the learning that's happening from students and the work they're doing, but how you do that and to what degree you do it has to be manageable for all involved. Nicole, if you can go to the next slide. Yeah. So this one, I'll hand it off to Nicole. You'll see that there are, I think, 7 areas that we're providing further guidance on and recommendations for our staff. And she's going to take it from here to help us understand what those are.
I had to get back to my mute button.
Oh, do you want me to? Why don't I share mine from here?
Can you do that?
Yes, happy to. Second. Okay. You can see it, right?
Can. Thank you. The updated remote learning guidance includes recommendations on collaborating with colleagues to support students, providing weekly learning plans, particularly because it's helpful for families to know what is expected for an entire week instead of students getting things day by day. We're also thinking about the amount of communication that families are getting and trying to make sure that we streamline that. The importance of providing.
All right.
Thank you. The importance of providing new learning and content and the way in which that should be thought about and provided. We're also providing for you some samples, student daily schedules, guidance on student engagement and what teachers should do to support student engagement, feedback on feedback and grading as far as both assignments and term grades, and effective practices for remote learning, so that we're thinking about all of those pieces coming together. Next slide.
See it?
Nope.
It went. I can see it on my screen. I don't know why you can't see it on your screen. Hold on.
This is Helen. I don't see it either.
Okay, I'm trying. Really trying.
It's there now.
Oh, wait. Okay.
Not big, not big, but it's there.
Sure. Getting there. Do you see it now?
Thank you.
Okay.
What's
going on?
We really, in the beginning and the way that this community is structured on teacher autonomy and how important that is true. We really do want to think about how we start to make sure that folks are working in a team structure so that learning continues, as I think somebody asked it earlier, I can't remember who, but that learning will continue even if a teacher becomes unavailable, and that there's not a whiplash experience for students if their teacher isn't there and now they're having to get used to an entirely new system. So really impressing upon the importance of, and I know principals are supporting teams in working in a team approach, having consistent schedules, structures to the day work provided for students. It also allows for teams to distribute workload and to leverage the strength of its members. So we're thinking about those teams where, somebody is super tech savvy and someone else is not. Like, how does that person use their tech skills in order to support the entire team in the work? And then someone else is really strong in math skills or creating more creative opportunities for students, how do all students benefit from that? And this is an opportunity for us to build on that. Examples of this is, elementary grade level teams are identifying what they want students to work on. They put that out for the week. They divide up the subject areas. They come together and put together a document that's easily accessible by students and families. Music teachers are working together to identify activities. They're pulling resources and developing content that spans grade levels, that students can get some direction to work on 2 to 3 times a week. And the music teacher shares the resources with classroom teachers so that families are able to access everything in one place. So that's one example. Next slide. Middle school teams, you heard Gabe talk about this and how, at particular schools, the entire 7th grade might be working together to pull something together and make sure that their work complements each other. There are also teams that are working across the district on content. And so, folks are having access to that. They're able to share resources. Also, our art team put together an assignment called Found Object Color Wheel. And so they gave students a color wheel and asked students to send in, this is a picture of a student created color wheel with the items that were found around their home, and just really helping kids engage in the art content. Next slide.
Yep.
We wanted to share just a sample. There are many very solid plans out there. We really want to share a sample of weekly learning plans that teacher teams are putting out. And so this in a particular school, CCS, all the kindergarten teachers came together to work on this particular project. The choice board, this is what students received to work on for this week. This is a sample schedule of how to schedule your day. This is the choice board for math, science.
Oh, okay. I think Nicole just explained how it's every subject, including all.
Every subject, exactly. Every subject is available, and families have the choice to pick and choose what they work on with students, as well as how much time they spend on things each day, what works in the life of a family, is what our teachers are really trying to consider in the work that they are creating for students.
Jen Buller, can you just add also, because on top of this, your kindergarten teachers are also, can you just describe how they're connecting with their students and how they're interacting with them on top of the work?
Sure. So they, like Nicole said, they come together and they put this out weekly. They layer in what the specialists are also giving out. So there's a link in there for art, music, and PE, and what the opportunities are provided there. But then many of them are hosting virtual morning meetings. One teacher's doing a lunchtime with the teacher, so students can virtually have lunch with her. And then most of them are now transitioning to use the interactive platform of Seesaw, so students can share work and hear feedback from teachers and interact with them that way as well. So they have a myriad of ways that they're interacting with their students at the kindergarten level.
Great. And then we'll show one more example. I can hear some clicking. I'm not sure if folks are on mute, but maybe folks should go on mute to be helpful, because there's some clicking going on. It's distracting. And then Nicole, can you explain this as well?
This is an example of what the 3rd grade team at Baker put together. So families, this is suggested. This is what you do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. This is approximately 3 hours of work each day. But this is an interactive sheet so that families can click on Students can click on and get to the reading that is assigned. They can get to videos and other assignments. You can see the specials for week 1. The specials have been laid out across the bottom, and so you can choose to work on art, music, PE, but when you click in there, you'll see the assignments that are specific for that particular grade. And this is what's going on to all 3rd grade students at Baker School.
I just want to be clear that this is, we're showing these examples to you, but these are also samples we'll be showing to, be sharing widely, because this in this case, the weekly learning plan, just like teacher collaboration earlier in the presentation, or one of the practices that we know is, excuse me, helping families and also students, approach a day, plan their work, do their work, get support, but also have a real comprehensive approach to a day, to a week. Go back. Nicole, let's, just because we have a lot of slides to go through, let's keep moving to the next section, which is introducing new learning and content.
Introducing new learning, we do recognize, when we started this and didn't realize we would be down for as long as we are, in 7 weeks and probably a lot longer than that. As Susan said earlier, who knows if we're even coming back in the fall. Hopefully that's not true. But things are not looking great. We want to make sure that teachers are mindful as they introduce new content, that the best practices that happen in the classroom still need to happen remotely. And so we can't do everything that we do in the classroom, but we do need to be mindful of of how we introduce new content. And so we want to make sure that it's shared in a way that all students can access the material and the information, that teachers continue to differentiate so that students can engage with the new materials, that they continue to accommodate and support students with their learning needs, students with disabilities, as well as our EL students. And at this point in the year, teachers know very well their students. So not to say that the accommodations and supports aren't challenging, but they know what their students need. And so this is a great opportunity to remind folks to keep that in mind as they're working to develop curriculum. As we're thinking about teaching new content, thinking about you making sure that everything isn't brand new to students and that you're using, teaching new content through skills that students already have. So for instance, if you're teaching a new area in science or social studies, if you've already taught kids how to use research skills, you're teaching that new content through students using research skills. And so we have some, we want folks to think about that. That's the support that the coordinators are giving to teachers as well. We also think it's important and really want to impress upon teachers the importance of conferring with their grade level teams and curriculum coordinators when they introduce new content, so that students have access to the same skills and the same content, because they will be moving on to a new school, to a new teacher next year, to a new grade level. And we need to be able to say to the folks who are receiving them next year, even for our 8th grade students, which I know some of our 8th grade students are really nervous about, like, am I going to be ready for high school? Well, if we say to the high school, this is what happened for these 8th grade students, then high school teachers can get into position to receive students and provide them the supports that they need. We also want to make sure that students are not held accountable for new content and skills. And in the case that they are unable to get the content or learn the new skills, that we are not assuming that what happened during this time is something that they're able to do, and that teachers should expect to reintroduce new content when school opens again.
So Nicole, we're getting tight on time here. So if you can, on these, go a little more quickly, but I don't think we'll show the schedules in depth here. Because just the notion that we're providing sample schedules for teachers to use as a model, basically. But you can explain.
Right. So we are providing sample schedules for teachers to use as a model. the guidance from the state is that we would use approximately prepare approximately a half of a school day or 3 hours in our land for student learning. This is not to expect that teachers will be in front of students on Google Hangouts or any other platform for 3 hours, but that students have 3 hours worth of work, worth of learning to engage with independently, maybe with teachers, but also, you know, that the time isn't expected face-to-face time. Next.
Just, can you just, as I just go through these, can you just explain briefly what they are?
Right. So where these are the recommendations that we're putting forward, that we provide for K-5, that we provide 20 minutes 3 times a week of physical education and wellness, a daily routine. That's something that kids know they do this every day. I'm reading or writing or doing a problem of the week every day. That 2 hours is spent on the content areas. And this doesn't have to be like 30 minutes every day, but over the week, think about, you know, how much we could spend, how much time needs to be spent on each content area. And then for our 6th to 8th grade students, the daily routine is somewhere between 60 to 90 minutes. And that includes, you know, practice in world language, problem of the week in math, physical education, movement, 2 hours in those content areas as well. Next. And 30 minutes for art or music. Over days that can switch back and forth based on what's been provided by the team.
And so I think this is supposed to be student daily schedule, right? This is,
yes.
I think we just titled this wrong. Actually, this is 30 minutes of art and music each day, not over the course of a week.
Right. Each day. Sorry.
Right. No, that's.
We also, and we spoke to this earlier, the importance of monitoring student engagement. Teacher teams right now are collecting data on how much engagement they're getting, how often, what kind of assignments they're getting back, you know, and what that looks like, so that they have a realistic approach to what students are able to do, what they're asking students to do. Nonetheless, as we're thinking about student engagement, it's important to monitor that, reach out to the student or the family directly if you're not getting a response from students, connect with other teachers who have the student the same way we do, you know, while we're working together, except we'll do this remotely. Consider office hours. Teachers do have designated office hours that they're expected to commit to, and so maybe working with those students specifically during the office hours is important. And then, of course, reaching out to guidance counselors, kind of like Jen spoke of earlier, reaching out to guidance counselors or administrators so that they can take teacher concerns to the next level. Grading and feedback for students. We do not expect teachers to provide grades on assignments, but that they will provide feedback for students, particularly on new learning. They will provide feedback to students on assignments, and they will let students know up front, this is an assignment that you will get feedback on. You do need to turn this in. And as far as report cards, middle school students will receive pass for term 3, and they'll receive pass or fail for term 4 if we are not back in school by the end of term 4. And then we still need to think about what feedback and progress reports look like for cycle 2 for our K-5 students. So we haven't quite figured that out, because the way the progress reports are scored about whether or not a student is meeting expectations, not yet, or exceeding expectations or approaching expectations. we're not quite sure how that's going to work in this remote learning experience. And so we do need to get some feedback from teachers on what they think would work best in this environment.
Anthony, I don't know if it's appropriate now for you, if you guys are ready. I know you're working on this with your coordinators and your faculty council in terms of credit, no credit. Is this a good time to talk about that now, or are you guys still working through some of the details on that?
Ben, I think you have it right in terms of we are working with our BHS Administrative Council on what it looks like moving forward now that we're going to be offering credit. It is within a context following DESE guidance that it will be pass-fail, but we're working through the particulars around what that looks like in terms of grades have been earned for quarters 1 and 2, and then making decisions around term 3 and term 4 to both maximize student engagement and also to be responsive to kids who struggle. So we're still working on some of the particulars of that. In terms of scheduling, we're working with administrators and with faculty around clarifying when certain subject areas will be the periods where they'll connect with families. So it will not be an outward-facing, family-facing document, but rather an internal structure to make sure that we're minimizing teachers teaching while others are trying to teach at the same time. Hal, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that's it's significant. We have students that are taking 7 different classes, and there's only a narrow window in the given day when it's convenient for most teachers to engage with kids. So we're trying to create some type of background structure that says if you're the science teacher, you can expect that the majority of your kids will be free on this given day at this given time, because other classes should try to move away from that. While at the same time understanding that we've got some teachers that can't teach in the scheduled time for them because it's a morning time and they've got small children, and they're going to necessarily be interacting with their kids outside of their assigned time. So again, it's not a schedule, and as Anthony says, it's not something that we're going to be pushing out, but it's something that we're trying to set up internally to minimize the number of conflicts that a student might have amongst their many classes.
Great. Thank you, Hal. And both those things are incredibly complicated. And one of our major concerns that coordinators and principals and folks at the high school as well, department heads, have been really working on is this notion of credit, no credit, pass, fail. It's really complicated in these waters to understand why a kid wouldn't pass something when he or she or they are really challenged with maybe it's illness at home or any given struggles which families are experiencing right now. So our team, both at the K-8 level and the high school level, are really thinking very hard on this and understanding what's appropriate, what isn't appropriate, and how do we account for that for really each given child and his or her family. So Anthony, one more thing, and then let's wrap up this presentation so we can open to questions.
Just quick, just like I benefit, and I know my principal colleagues in Brookline benefit from our team, it has been really helpful to connect for BHS and I think PSB to connect with Needham and Newton. So I'm in touch with Aaron Saccotti of Needham, Henry Turner of Newton North, and Jamie Chisholm of Wellesley to figure out questions around credit, pass, fail, structuring or scheduling, all of that, both and maximizing student engagement and trying to figure out how we engage in supporting the heck out of students and families. So I just wanted to add that piece that we're connecting with other principals too.
Great, thank you, Anthony. Nicole, if you could just wrap up with the next steps, then we can have Barbara and others help us with the question and answer period.
I actually did talk about these next steps earlier. Right. So I can repeat them if you want, or we could look quickly at the effective practices.
You know what I like to do? I like to skip the effective practices, but Casey, if you can just give us a short summary on the bullet around, continue to develop the work already way to support students with disabilities. That's a crucial aspect that, not only across the state, but across the nation, folks are really, struggling with. And I know you guys have been working hard at it with your team and special educators. So if you can just give us a quick update on that, then we'll get to questions and answers.
Sure. So a quick update is that special education staff have all reached out to students who are on their caseloads, so students with disabilities, 504s and IEPs, to connect with their families. Also, they spent most of this week connecting with families to find out what's the best way for them to receive materials and resources. At the high school level, they've already started, Matt, you can probably speak a little bit more about this if you're on, but they've already started meeting with students. I think he probably said that earlier in the call, but Learning Center teachers have also started to group students, meet with students. Moving forward, the IEP teams are going to work on weekly learning support plans. So in addition to what Nicole shared, you would see for a student with an IEP, let's say, who has speech services, you would see that weekly learning plan, but added in would be speech services. So that might look like a virtual session with student and parent to talk through what types of services and supports are working and not working and adjusting in real time. We are also looking at developing new protocols and structures for holding virtual IEP meetings, because as of right now, we don't have any guidance from the state or federal level that IEP timelines will be are loosened, although DESE has said that they will certainly be really flexible with that. So what I guess the big picture is we've connected with folks, so those connections have been made, and folks are beginning to hone in on what the specific needs are and what that delivery of services and support should look like for each kid. The next sort of deliverable to families will be these weekly learning support plans that will look different for each student, depending, again, on parents' capacity, but also what each individual kid needs, which a lot of that plays into it: disability, age, ability to sort of sit in front of a computer. So the more sort of customizing piece there. Asa, do you have a question or something to add?
If I could add, right now the team at Heath is really looking very specifically, general ed teachers and special ed teachers, to look, and we also fully acknowledge that the kids on our caseloads are pretty mild to moderate disabilities. So we're looking at where we can kind of streamline services to create learning groups so kids don't feel isolated. They see each other as they would in a learning center, and they feel connected, and they're getting a robust set of their goals met. But we also recognize that might be impossible right now to meet every single goal. So where can we hone in and create content in community so that they feel really connected, big picture and small picture also.
I appreciate that, Asa. Ben, if I could just add one piece, and the gen ed side is working on this too, but I would think more especially so with special ed, just given that each student has a unique plan, is, some of our teachers are getting sick. Some of them have different responsibilities. And so every teacher's capacity is different. Every special education staff member's capacity looks different. So we are encouraging a group approach, a team approach, so that if one person does need to step away for whatever reason, there is to some extent a contingency plan, someone else who could step in and maybe not provide the same exact service, but knows what to pick up.
Great. Okay, let's pause there. I want to get to the questions and answers from that Barbara and I think Susan are going to monitor. I just want to pause for a moment to say, Nicole, thank you for the presentation, but really more importantly, thank you to you and your team, all the folks who are on this call, building out our next version of guidance. What's going to happen from here, just to share with the committee, is what you've seen here will come out as very clear recommendations, templates, samples for folks to really use and model their work after. Again, as you can see, a lot of it is built from what we're already doing, in the district as well, but really building from those good examples. So I do want to stop here, and Barbara and Susan or school committee, let you guys take over from here to make sure we have the questions from the public, because I know there are a bunch of questions coming in. We want to make sure we give those folks a chance to engage.
And Ben, just as we're getting started, can we just make note for the public to know that we are able to go beyond the 5 o'clock so that there's not concern that if their question isn't asked in the first 10 minutes that it's not going to be heard?
Yep, and I also do want to give folks on our staff who have difficult and full lives, if you don't need to stay on, if you can't, please feel free to opt out. We'll have folks here to answer. So Barbara or Susan or...
I just want to, before we go to this, I meant to say this at the beginning and I apologize. I really want to send a special thank you to the coordinators who have been working tirelessly to feed into what has been created. They've been working with teachers. They're literally like back and forth. And especially to Mary and Michelle for their support and their work on really honing this plan. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. I'm going to take over right now, and I want to begin by saying this was a very, very helpful presentation, and we really appreciate everyone who has come and who has talked about what is happening and what they, particularly themselves, are doing. We have received a lot of comments and some questions, and I'm going to start with just reading a couple of things and asking some questions. The very first thing we got was basically a fairly short question. At what point would we give up on the school year? Why go back for 3 or 4 weeks or less? And then the second question was, any chance school would be scheduled for summer? So if someone would like to answer that question, that would be helpful.
Asa, go ahead.
I do not determine when we come back to school and for how long. Thank goodness. But I do know that in the conversations I'm having with my school team, when we do come back, no matter the circumstances, we are going to spend a lot of time being in community and taking care of each other, because our kids, when they come out of the other end of this, emotional cannon, we're going to need to be in community with each other. And so while we're right now as a team putting together learning plans, we're also thinking social emotional learning when we come back together. And so whenever we come back, and again, that's not my job to determine, we are going to be poised to do that social emotional work right out of the gate, because that's going to be the most impactful and powerful thing we can do for our kids, in our opinion.
Great. Thank you, Asa. And absolutely, I think there's just a ton of support for that. In terms of the specific question, I think we may get to a point where you're down to a week or 10 days or something like that. But I'm speaking, as an individual here, but I also appreciate my role. Our schools are such places of community and connection and normalcy for our families, our students, our staff. And even if there's very little time, I think it's all worth our while, the school committee and others, to think about how powerful it will be, those moments when we come back together in community, and how much that'll add to our children's lives, how much it will add to our families' lives. I imagine there are some families out there who can't wait for our teachers to welcome their students back every single day of the week, and maybe on Saturdays and Sundays as well. But I don't mean to be sarcastic, but I think it'll have to come down to very, very few days for us not to want to welcome back our students, our families into our classrooms.
It's also important to note that we are continuing to plan for our at-risk students over the summer, as we always do. So literacy, math programs that happen over the summer, we hope to still be able to run. They may actually be extended to address some student needs, but it wouldn't be a typical, it would just be our typical support.
Great. Next question.
Barbara, I have a clarifying question and a question connected to that. Can I ask that at this time?
Sure.
One sort of connection to the school calendar is a question regarding using some of our makeup days, possibly during our April break. That's just food for thought. We would need to talk about that some more. And then could you just clarify for me, Ben, when the plan will be shared with staff and when we can expect this to be implemented? I think I'm hearing a lot of concerns from community members and families about consistency, and I heard that a lot of that addressed in the presentation today, structural inconsistencies across schools and how we can address that as far as clear expectations for teachers and families. So I'm wondering when the plan will be shared with staff and when families can expect that planning to be implemented, whether it's new learning or these sample weekly schedules.
Yep. So we shared it with BU leadership earlier today, and we'll have a conversation with them tomorrow. And what I'm hoping for is that, and I mean, I'm speaking for Nicole and teaching learning at this point, is to have more input today, input tomorrow, and then wrap it up by tomorrow, and then communicate, late tomorrow, over the weekend, that sort of stuff. What you'll see, I don't think people shouldn't expect a sea change on Monday. These things will take time for people to take on and sort of absorb and adjust. Okay. So that's the timeline, is, just in the next, whatever, 48 hours, and then, taking these things on over the next week. In terms of consistency, I think it's a fundamental question, Jennifer. Folks, every day of the school year, there are different things going on in the same grades, in the same class, in the same school, across Brookline. That autonomy is a hard fought value in Brookline. So, we're seeing that again here. So I don't think, while these suggestions and this new guidance is designed to help people, come together and utilize, effective practices and to work together to have some more consistency, some more coherence. I don't think anyone can be under the impression that all of a sudden Brookline operates from the same page on the same curriculum, like other school districts do. They have different cultures, different values. And so that will be a challenge for us, especially if people ask or are demanding it, as some people are. But that's not what our work agreement calls for, or specifies, or requires. And I think all of us on this phone call realize that there needs to be a balance. There needs to be some greater coherence. That we need to have a high level of work and support. But I just want to say that we're
necessarily the kind of consistency, but I think perhaps addressing sort of whether or not there's a lot of question about whether or not there will be new learning. I'll throw this out there. Maybe we don't want to talk about it right now, but whether or not Zoom is going to be an approved platform. So I just think I think it's more just about our messaging and explaining our clear expectations. So I think that's more about the communication to families about what they can expect and when they can expect it, and what it's going to look like. And I think that we're getting there now, but I think that there's a real want for that. So I think that's more the consistency, not that each teacher is teaching the same thing at the same time.
Yeah. And I think your communication can get clearer and more concise and coherent. I totally agree with you on that one. And the other thing about new learning, which I think Nicole may have mentioned, is that's an area where we really can we say in third grade over the next 7 weeks, the new learning will be X and Y. And we're not there yet on that question. And that could be the same thing at, between high school classes or between 6th grade science classes. But that's an area we have to really come to terms with. And I think it makes sense on many levels to do it for students, for families, for teachers. But it's an area we have to keep working on. Absolutely.
So can I pick up on that? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to pick up on this because I think that it's this in and of itself is probably one of the core questions of how we are designing the next 3 months. Again, it's a third of the school year. And so I want to make sure that the public, us, I think everyone understands that standardization, kill and drill, worksheets, like that's not who Brookline is, never was, never will be. No one wants it to be that. At the same time, the let 1,000 flowers bloom, as I alluded to earlier, is causing a fair amount of consternation with not just parents but students who have to check multiple platforms or having to juggle, especially students with, without families who can support that kind of work, especially with students who have organization issues, whatever it is, even the ones that are don't have those challenges. And so I guess what I think is really important to do is have a very rigorous and substantive conversation about where and how we expect to balance consistency, not standardization, not worksheets, but consistency and autonomy. Because I think you get a very different answer if you're thinking about kids in the AP class, they're all taking the same AP class versus kindergartners. So we're not going to have one answer. And so and we're not going to have the same answer by different grade bands where different kids can do different things. And by the way, we're going to have to accommodate, lots of different learning styles and home situations and teaching situations. So I do think that the anchor of these are our grade level expectations and working backwards with sort of how much of that do we think we can realistically do given how disruptive this all is, and thinking about not so much standardization in terms of everyone by our educators of what those expectations are. So even things like, what does meaningful feedback look like? Is meaningful feedback a nice to have if your teacher feels like doing it once or twice a week? Or are there expectations that feedback is part of educational advancement? Feedback and is not grading, right? And I just want to make sure we're not, I know you all as individuals are not caricaturing this conversation. And I think that the clearer that we can be about what we mean from an educational vision point of view and a leadership point of view of what does this 3-month period of time look like, I think it will benefit all of us and it'll enable us to have the right conversation. So I needed to say that because I think consistency, everyone's worried about, lots of details, but that's actually, I'm worried about those, but I'm really worried about what are we aiming at for the next 3 months? And again, for the 8th graders, it's going to matter a lot more because they're all going to the high school than it'll matter from 3rd grade to 4th grade, right? Anyway, full stop.
So I completely agree with you, Susan. And a concern that I have is I do not want us to be conflating autonomy for each teacher with having some set of minimum expectations and standards for what this online learning platform is going to look like. Because right now it appears that there's tremendous variation between the experiences that some children are having as opposed to the experiences of others. So if the school department could very clearly articulate what the expectations are, what the standards are, exactly along the lines of what you've been saying, Susan, I think that will go a long way toward calming this situation, or at minimum, having a baseline of facts from which we can all operate under. So even if we end up disagreeing about the decisions that are made and what those expectations are, at least we will know what they are. And I think that would be an important starting point. Because I'm all for personal autonomy, of course, but that doesn't mean that we should be not having any expectations or standards whatsoever. And I'm not saying that's the current situation, but there's a lot of confusion around that. So that's where the communication is.
Yeah, Anthony, you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I think that both those questions that Susan and David raise are really important. And I can speak to the high school piece within the larger PSB context, that we are a credit-bearing institution and our students are credit-earning students. And so in this world in which we've decided due to COVID-19 that we are following DESE guidance and going to a credit, no credit world, we want to be really clear with families, and I'm being a little general now, but about the ways in which we're maximizing student engagement. And then internally, so to me, that's individual teachers communicating with families after teams of teachers have decided what are the key content areas and skills. But it's also, we have a great deal of autonomy in a faculty and staff of 300. And so determining, can we come to a common and fairly simple rubric in which we're saying this is what pass looks like and this is what doesn't pass looks like, and also build in ways that we're still incentivizing kids who maybe didn't start the year hot and struggled first quarter and second quarter, and we want to pull those kids along in any way we can. But I think, David, you mentioned technology. I think everyone on this call agrees we want to put the best tools in our educators' hands. And I think the district is working through how to do that. We have also come to an agreement with our union in which we have been very general because of the environment we're in about what ways teachers can use to connect those educator-chosen platforms. I think Kathleen did a really nice job of speaking to that before and the different ways that our teachers are connecting. I would just say our agreement currently leaves a lot of space for what those platforms are. And I think that makes sense given the environment. I want to work on and I know we all do, on the technology side, on making sure the best tools are available and that support is available for those tools.
Well, for me, it's not even necessarily about the technology in and of itself. If one teacher likes Zoom and another teacher likes Google, that's less important to me. I'm talking about more from the perspective of consistency. So if there's one teacher who's having 3 hours a day of screen time with his or her students, and there's another teacher where it's 0, I think that's a problem, at least potentially. So if that's going to be a conscious decision, then so be it, and then people have different opinions about it. But I think we want to set bi-directional standards. What are the expectations for students, for what students are going to be getting out of this? And also, what are the expectations, just minimum expectations, for what it is that we want our educators to be providing to students?
So I think the minimum expectations for teachers and educators and staff, David, is a very interesting point. And I don't have an answer for this, but I mean, the work agreement between the school committee and the union is I think lays those out. And what we're trying to do with this, further guidance that we just shared a summary of you today is to sort of nudge people to say, within those expectations that are spelled out in the work agreement, these are good practices that we know help teachers, help students, help families. A requirement, I'm not sure if you're saying that, does become quite challenging with the flexibility that we've all agreed to in that work agreement. Just it's very difficult.
One of the things that I want to say is that several of the questions had to do with the technology aspect. Apparently, people have started using Google Meets, and 2 different letters from 2 different schools talked about the fact that was scratchy, delayed, inconsistent audio and video throughout. And that had been after several days of pretty seamless operations with Zoom. And every letter that mentioned technology really talked about using Zoom. One person, in fact, wrote some details. He was a technology person, about how if you use a certain password protected way of getting in there, you will avoid the Zoom, the attacks that are being made on the Zoom platform.
Yep. So let me just answer that very directly. So surprising to me anyway, the emails I've gotten, the subject I've gotten the most emails about this week has been about Zoom. Okay, which I wouldn't have expected that, but it is true. Nicole and Scott Moore working very closely to figure out, also with our tech folks, on how we can make sure we're using Zoom in a way that does a number of things. One, protects student privacy. Okay, protects our folks from attacks. Okay, is used in a way where Zoom is not sharing student information and recordings of what we're doing with other tech companies. Okay, and so and also that people won't get into those rooms that aren't invited. And one of the ways that you do that with Zoom is you create a user agreement with them. It's beyond their free service. Okay. Scott Moore has been working to get that tied down with them. As I've talked to other superintendents, there's been delays from Zoom side on that as well. And so we're close to that. He's been making progress with them. And between the guidance and the changes that Zoom has come out with recently, in terms of waiting rooms and changes in their policy and us making a work agreement, we are heading towards making Zoom available in ways that it'll be safe for our students and also comply with our privacy, our guidelines, and commonly accepted use. You've gotten no shortage of concerns, complaints from staff, from families, and also legal authorities, law enforcement authorities about Zoom. So there are real concerns there about putting people in danger or at risk. And we want to, as always, make sure we do it safely. So change will be coming on that, but not until we can assure that our students it's being used safely. There are advantages to the program. I'm also do hear what Susan Ditkoff said earlier is, by letting many folks use different tools, we are facing the risk that a student will have to use and many different platforms or approaches on any given day from a number of teachers. And that is something that, I hear two sides on this area.
Just a real quick interjection. Part of our effective practices guidance includes asking teams to pick a platform and consistently use that so that families are not having to figure out, like, do I go to this, am I in Google Classroom? Am I in Canvas? Where am I supposed to be? Where do I get my students' assignments, and that kids have a consistent experience? The other thing too that I talked about really is coordinators really being ready to work.
Everyone has to mute except for Nicole. Everyone has to mute except for Nicole. We're getting interference.
Yeah.
Thank you. As coordinators, especially K-8, but I know the high school folks are already really trying to make this happen, is what exactly are the skills that we want to make sure students have? And if we can have some consistency on that the autonomy might be in the content you use to teach skills. So if we want students to have research skills, or if we want students to be able to write in a certain way at a particular grade level, that we really highlight the most important things that students need to know at each grade level, and ask that teacher teams work on those and incorporate those. So that is part of where our curriculum coordinators are poised to go. Ben, you're on mute.
Barbara's on mute too.
A couple of the letters we received had to do with the conflict between the fact that families had to work at home. They were not going to their office anymore, and they were busy all day, and that they felt that teachers had that same issue, but some people were annoyed about that, whereas others said teachers need some more help, and maybe that's one way we can use paras to do some of the work when teachers have young children. But it was interesting here because this particular person talked about the fact that older children can read and they can follow activities somewhat independently, and are often invited to various live sessions that they can handle on their own. But that younger children need more direct and interactive supervision, direction, and opportunities for fun and active play. Younger students are not, at least at this school, receiving what they need. Don't get me wrong, our son's kindergarten teacher was the first to reach out and offer lots of links. But basically, this person said, you know, this teacher has her own family and she needs more help. And that did come up in a couple of letters that we got. I would like to, because I don't know how much longer we're going along, and I think we have touched most of the main topics, not completely, but can there be more mandatory Zoom or Google Classroom teaching for high school students so they can connect, and more structure going forward? That's pretty much what it is. But I have a couple of letters that I received from students that I would like to read. And this first one says, "Dear members of the Curriculum Subcommittee, my name is Ben and I'm an 8th grader. I benefit from interaction with my peers and a structured day. However, Monday through Friday, there has been a lack of curriculum and interaction due to the recent outbreak of coronavirus. Even when school was in session, the overwhelming majority of our assignments were online. We should use that technology now. Our school motto is work hard, be kind, help others, build relationships. This motto has been drilled into my brain since the first day of kindergarten. I believe we should continue to follow it now during these uncertain times. Despite being out of school, we should still be learning. When we left school Thursday, March 12th, I was told there would still be a workload and a structure to our 8 to 2:30 school day. I need this because I'm incredibly stressed for high school next year. There is a lot of change in the world happening now. I believe that we should continue with a workload similar to that which was provided during the months previous to this outbreak. In Brookline, I'm under the impression that teachers get much of their teaching material from outside sources, many of which are available online. I wish these sources to be made accessible for all students to use. Also, many students benefit from actual contact with their peers, which due to COVID-19 is no longer possible. However, there are online tools such as Zoom and Google Meets that our educators can use. Just because school is paused does not mean our education should be forced to wait as well. The only emails I have received from any of my teachers have been group emails to my whole class. No one has called. Our lives have been changed, and many people, including myself, want everything to go back to the way it was. Some personal contact keeps us connected. There are pieces of this changing puzzle that are out of Brookline's control, but education is not one of them. Basically, I just want to keep learning so I can get ready for high school. I know with a little teacher guidance, we can still learn online and have some contact with my teachers, whom I miss. And a little classroom instruction would give me a little structure in this 7-day-a-week inside the house world we are living in. I understand that this is not a simple task. All I need is this, or a similar option, to be put into effect. That's one letter, and here's a slightly shorter one. Hello, I'm an 8th grade student. Personally, I have not had the best experience with remote learning. It has not been necessarily bad, but the amount of learning and instruction can be improved. I believe that the point of 8th grade should be to prepare the students for high school. If we are losing 2 or more months in this awful situation, we should be able to learn, and teachers should be able to provide some instruction. I am not asking for a 6.5 hours of learning a day. None of my teachers has arranged a single video session for the class. None has emailed me personally. Additionally, I have not had even 3 hours of work in total from all my classes in any week. I can empathize. I know that many of my teachers have children at home who are dependent on them, and based on what my parents are saying, working at home is really difficult, especially with the noises and interruptions during work. My school has instilled a sense of meaning into our lives, including the meaning of hard work, friendships, and knowledge that I was only to ask for help. I know that it can be difficult to get in contact with some students, but we all need to overcome some obstacles. And my teachers should know that we students need to be actively engaged because we do not have the self-discipline and skill to learn in a completely independent way. During COVID-19, we can spend our time productively learning, or we can waste our time gaming. I know other students that have been waiting for teacher communication and the posting of work. The entirety of the learning right now is put on the students, and even with materials, we need guidance and encouragement. I am not asking for teacher attention from 8 to 2:30, an 8 to 2:30 school day. I am asking for a reasonable compromise in the middle, helping me and my fellow classmates to learn and to make our time worthwhile instead of playing video games, watching television and YouTube. With more teacher support, we can meet this challenge. Now, what I would say is we have addressed many of these issues as we have talked today, but to me it was very interesting to hear the anxiety that these two 8th graders are feeling by what is happening. And I think that that probably is true of many other students at that level in high school and even in lower grades. And I would say that for me, it was really something important to notice because I think this worrisome feeling that these children have tells us that part of what we have to do is reassure them and let them know we're here in a more consistent way. They need to know that somebody is still thinking about them, working to help them succeed. Clearly, we have here two very bright young students. And if they're having that kind of nervousness, imagine what some of the other children who are more unsure of themselves might be having. So this whole aspect of the psychological impact that this kind of event will have on students is just important for us to notice. I have more letters I could read to you, but I don't know about you, but I think I'm getting to the point of reaching overload here. So I don't know if you have any questions or other things. I do think we have talked about having another meeting next week that would be largely it can't be public comment the way we're thinking of it, but which we could receive more of these letters and questions and answer them. As I said, I have some other things. One group has set up a survey online, and that's something that is going on. So what I would say to you is, certainly for school committee, we are getting these emails, and they are up on the website, not the website, in our mailboxes. So I would read them and see what your reactions to them are and what we can do to help. I think we are making good strides, but we have a way to go.
So I do have a question about access. What types of efforts are being made for asynchronous learning for the recorded portions? And what I mean by recorded portions, if, for example, the classroom teaching aspects, that half hour to 3 hours a day, that varies, are those sessions being recorded? Because if they are, then perhaps that could become an additional opportunity for students who are in those classes who are not able to access them live to be able to reach them at other points in the day so that they could benefit from whatever transpired. Because I think some challenges that we're going to currently have, especially in households where there are multiple children and maybe only one available computer, it's quite possible that some students just are not able to participate live, but they would have the resources necessary to follow along later in the day. Or sometimes it could be an issue where a child, probably a very young child, needs help from the parents in order to get online, and the parents aren't available during that particular time of day. So if someone could comment on what efforts are being made around that.
So this is also part of our effective practices guidance. There are training modules that show teachers how to record and also screencastify, I think it's called. Anything that they do so that students who are not able to connect with them at that time are able to access that later. How well folks are doing with that, I know our ETSs at each school are really supporting teachers in the use of technology and making sure that they're able to do those things. And so that's definitely a recommendation so that students who are unable to be there at the particular time that the class is live still have access to that material. I think the other thing that's important to say too, and I don't know if these students have reached out to the schools directly, but I encourage parents, if there's a specific concern that they have about a student experience, that they start with the teacher, work with the principal, because it's important for us to know all of this as a community, but the folks who can address the issue most readily are the people who are in the school. And so I think that's really important that folks, you know, as you're hearing this or if you're watching this, that you don't wait for public comment to address some of the issues, but that you actually bring that stuff directly to the teacher or to the principal if you're not getting a satisfactory response.
Are there any other questions or comments that people would like to make?
So Barbara, there were a number of things on the YouTube comment box. Do you want me to just read through them? Some of them we've addressed already, but do you want me to just read through them?
Yes.
Okay. So there were a number of comments. I tried to group these thematically. There were a number of questions about when we will get more complete communication. I think there was appreciation for the PowerPoint, but just making sure that there's time when people can sit and think about these questions and what implications it has. Will something be written? It was noted that other districts had written plans. When will they get more information about their children's schedule? If our questions, there were a lot of questions raised today. If those aren't going to get addressed at the beginning of next week, can you give us the timeline or the schedule of when they will get addressed? So a lot of questions about communication. Then there was a number of questions about staffing. So the backup question of planned staffing leaves, like a maternity leave upcoming, but also unplanned. So if someone gets sick and you don't have time to plan, what's the backup plan for that? Things that we, you know, is a known unknown, I guess. So there were a number of comments about it not just being about academics, but also about peer dynamics, social connections, and that sort of thing. There was a specific question about, can we get back into the building to get our instruments? We think the arts are important also. There were a number of questions around sort of how this differentiation. So what if kids aren't online learners? What if the online learning environment is challenging for them? How are the schedules going to be developed? That sort of thing. There were some very specific questions about the high school. So have decisions been made about, you know, how the progression within the high school? And so those were kind of the main themes. I might have missed one or two, but I think that was most of it. But I guess overall, it would probably be helpful as we've talked. There are so many implicit guiding principles and values. So the DESE recommendation is important to us, but it's, you know, Brookline has always considered DESE a floor, not a ceiling. So when we talk about what are our guiding principles for this, what does that look like? When we talk about what does it mean to have kind of meaningful engagement, what does meaningful engagement mean? Again, not as a micromanaging thing, but just what are we aiming at? There was another question about that came in, it wasn't on YouTube, about the consistency on autonomy question, clarity on what problems we need to solve, and if we don't have solutions now, how are we going to work to solve them? And then there were a number of things that came in about special education, specifically about, are all IEPs getting reviewed? Are what's happening with one-on-ones, what's the guidance around one-on-one conversations, how are the services going to get delivered for things that are best done in person, how are we thinking about that? So again, I think some of this we addressed already, some of it is going to come out at the beginning of next week, and some of it is sort of in process. But I just want to make sure that we could capture that feedback. And, you know, Barbara, to your point, I'm not sure, we certainly can have another public comment period. I think it's also probably important, though, to try to at least figure out how we would kind of wrestle some of this down. Again, not having all the answers at once, but just how we're going to do this so people can kind of see that progression.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback on to Susan, I think trying to get some of those answers out at our next meeting of the curriculum subcommittee would be a good use of our time. Some of the questions that are there and some that we've come up with, some that, you know, teachers are experiencing. You know, I think this has been I for one have seen this as a very helpful way to educate the whole community about what it is that is happening, what isn't happening, why it isn't happening, and where we want plan to go, and continue that that process. So we do have a meeting scheduled for.
We had talked about one next week. We have not scheduled it. It would have to be Tuesday, as it turns out.
From 3 to 5.
Yeah, we would have to end by 5 if it's on Tuesday. My question really would be, is that going to be enough? Is that enough time lapse to allow some of these things to work themselves out and to see, because we're bringing this to the schools at this point in a more finished form, what we're expecting. And the question is, if we do it next week, are we really going to have any different answers than we have today? And I'm not sure that we will.
And I think,
go ahead, Helen.
Just a real quick one. I think Nicole's suggestion of parents contacting their teachers on specific issues is really a good one, because it really, you get the answer right away. You know, the teacher is aware that there's a problem. So I really appreciated that comment from Nicole.
So we have a finance subcommittee meeting tomorrow. We have a school committee meeting on Monday night. I agree with Barbara that our staff, our teachers, our coordinators, our principals, need to continue to be doing the work and shaping it and responding to changes and addressing concerns at the school level. And then at the district level, we need time to get the communication out that you're talking about. Okay. And so I would urge you to reconsider having that meeting on Tuesday and maybe do it later. So all our folks have time to make the progress on the things we need them to make progress on.
Cole had also mentioned putting together an FAQ, perhaps along with the communication about what the plan is. If that's something that can be in the works, instead of spending time in meetings, if people can work on getting together, kind of working together all of the questions and other likely questions that people are having and put together answers to those, that might be a really productive and helpful use of time.
So go ahead.
Along with posting this presentation that happened. Go ahead, I'm sorry. I've cut you off twice.
So I have a slightly different perspective. I think that asking the teachers questions that the teachers don't know the answers to or have inconsistent answers on because they haven't heard what the direction is not going to be helpful. So I guess I would sort of say that a little bit of time invested in trying to figure out what those consistent things are that we are asking for and what the role is of teacher autonomy, that doing that sooner rather than later is a good use of time. I think it will prevent a lot of, and if where there's flexibility, great. And where there's going to be consistency in the future, but it's not there right now, great. But just the approach. I think what's happening right now is that we are getting so many incoming questions because people are getting different answers depending on who they ask. And so I appreciate, Ben, that people need to do the work and not sit in meetings. So please know I have no interest in sitting in any more meetings. At the same time, I think having some opportunity to focus on that communication and make sure it answers the questions that we're hearing, I think is a good use of time.
Yes, I agree. I think that the communication is a really important piece right now, getting out a consistent message from the district level about what expectations are, working with educators to get this information out about the plan so that they're in a place to be prepared to answer and field some of those questions is really important. And so families and students have a really clear understanding of what learning is going to look like. I think is really important. I mean, I'm okay with having the meeting on Tuesday or not. If we think we're not in a position to move forward, we can hold it and then decide when, we're not ready for the meeting later, but at some point we'll have to post it.
Nicole.
Right. I guess I'm just thinking that I think you're right in exactly what both you have said and Susan has said. I just think I'm not sure that having a meeting on Tuesday is going to have, I don't think we're necessarily going to have the answers. It's essentially 2 working days because today is Thursday. So you have Friday and you have Monday, which has a school committee meeting, which is going to take a lot of work time from the people who are doing the job. And I think maybe if we held it the following week,
No.
early in the week.
Sorry, Barbara, no. I really, really disagree. I think that if we do not get out a district level communication at the beginning of next week that tells people what is going on, we will be in far, far, far worse shape. It really will. And it will cause so much more angst than it has to cause. Not that every question has to be answered, but
that is our plan. I don't see how a curriculum subcommittee on Tuesday night or Tuesday afternoon late helps us do that.
when's it going out?
I mean, I'm hoping for Sunday or Monday.
Okay. So then then I'll say it a little bit differently. I think there has to be a feedback mechanism on that memo. Let me say it that way. Before it goes out.
I'm happy to, as I said, I'm working with the BU tomorrow on these things. And one of the first questions we'll ask about is consistent expectations. Okay. I'm happy to work with school committee members on feedback on that. Okay. As I often do. And I think, this notion of common expectations I agree with it on principle. I absolutely totally do. Okay. But it is no small thing in Brookline.
No, of course. Of course.
And we are, we've got to get you guys on board. We've got to get the BEU on board. Okay. That's the reality of this work. And again, I'm not trying to, slough it off. I'm trying to say that it takes some real time to work through those channels. And I need that time. And I don't see how a curriculum meeting on Tuesday afternoon helps us get that work done. But the work has got to get done.
And remember that Wednesday and Thursday, if I am correct, are the first 2 days of Passover. And Friday is Good Friday. So people have other commitments those days. I think it's pushing the staff quite a bit to get it done. I can meet Tuesday. It doesn't make any difference to me.
Ben, what do you think the mechanism, as we're talking about having input from the BEU, further input from the school committee, further input from the community, what do you think the mechanism, I think that's what Susan is saying, is that where is the time for that? Where is the best place? Appreciating that it takes time to put together the communication, but if that communication is ready Sunday, Monday, then having a meeting around that time, Monday, Tuesday morning or something like that seems like it might make sense.
if you're talking about communicating to the town, presenting to them, that's very different than having their questions. If they have just received something, are they going to have their questions at that point in time?
I think we need to separate here the issues of whether are we trying to have a meeting in order to review the communication that goes out, or is the purpose of the meeting to solicit community feedback? Because if it's the latter, then I would be inclined to agree with Ben that it makes more sense to push that out a bit so that the community has time to review that communication and respond to it in a meaningful manner. If, however, the purpose of the meeting is to go over the content of that communication and get a sense of the committee of whether we agree with it, then obviously we would need to meet on the sooner side.
Right. So there's a couple of things that we're considering, and especially our partnership with DEU, making sure that what we've put together is not interpreted as a conflict with the MOU is very important. That's one thing. The other thing is, earlier when I said that families should go directly to the teacher, it's not for big answers. It is for concerns like, I haven't heard anything, my child hasn't gotten any assignments, not anything broad picture, but like what exactly is the experience when, as a parent, you know that other students have gotten assignments, the classroom down the hall has assignments and your child hasn't. That's something that you should go directly to the teacher about. And I do understand the importance of a larger communication from the district. That is certainly important and is certainly going to happen, like our peer districts have started to put together. But there's not been any expectation that teachers haven't been in contact with students, have not reached out to them and provided assignments. So those letters that we heard read earlier say something different than what's the overall picture of what's going to happen in the district. And so I just wanted to highlight that.
Barbara, if I may, step in at Suzanne. I'm not on the committee, so I can't say whether you should have a meeting or not. However, I do feel if you don't have a meeting on Tuesday and then there's no time Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, then it's going to be over a week before you meet again. And I feel like this is a really critical time to get families and students on board with what we're trying to do. And so it feels to me like that would be a long time not to touch base. And perhaps Tuesday would at least be a time to touch base and see how we're doing.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't want to do something that is going to pressure the administration to get something out right away so we have some feedback by Tuesday. Now, if we're going to meet Tuesday to comment on what they have done and, give our opinions, that's fine. But I don't think, I don't see how we're going to get much feedback if it has just gone out. That's the problem.
Barbara, the only other thing that I wanted to say, though, is that just to remind everyone that following week is currently scheduled as April break. So as we talk about and think about, right? Do we have we have a full another week?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
I really hope that the communication goes out Sunday so that families can have a better sense of what things might look like for the week ahead, or the direction that we're heading in as a district. So that is my hope. I'm inclined to hold the space for Tuesday. I do think it's a long time to let it go if something comes up and we need to address it, or we're not able to get the communication out, or for whatever happens. I think that it's just such a heightened sense of, and there's a real urgency that I think that it's worth keeping the meeting for right now. And so I know next on the agenda is new business, and so I'm going to throw out that on our upcoming agendas at this meeting or the next meeting, I would like to include a discussion of school site councils as part of our new business.
I'm not putting it on the agenda for the next meeting.
That wasn't my request.
Yeah, no, but that's a whole new subject.
I'm just putting it on the agenda. It's in the minutes now at some point.
I told you the other day, we'll put it on probably later on, but I don't think we can do it right now. Yeah, so we can set this meeting for Tuesday afternoon. You know, I think it's too early, but that's fine. I don't mind having the meeting.
It would have to be, if we're going to do either an hour or 2 hours, before the selectmen meet at 6. So if we wanted public and
5. Big says we have to be finished by 5.
Okay.
So we could do a 3 to 5 and know that in fact we have to end at 5. Can everyone meet 3 to 5 on Tuesday? The curriculum subcommittee, that is.
I can.
I can.
Susan? Oh, I think
I can.
Oh no, she's still here.
That's Nicole. I can.
You can, Nicole?
Yeah. I don't know, Susan.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Okay. So why don't we put that down and then, we'll move forward.
Right. All right. Any other questions, comments, etc.?
I think it's dinner time.
I think so too.
Can I make?
We all work better with some food in our stomachs.
Carlin has something to say. Carlin?
Yeah, Nicole, I wanted to say thank you though to Nicole and Ben to pulling together all of the people who participated. I think that it really made for a rich conversation and helped to provide the committee and the community with a different insight than we usually receive. And I think that that was very beneficial for today. So I appreciate that and appreciate the amount of time that was given towards answering some questions from the public. And I hope we're able to have more opportunity for questions at the next meeting as well.
Carlin wanted to say something, Barbara. Can Carlin speak?
Oh, I see.
I wouldn't be a wellness coordinator if I didn't mention self-care at this point for everyone. I just want to make sure that we're all taking care of ourselves and our families and making sure that we're integrating some sort of self-care practices, whatever those look like. Hopefully they're mindfulness and other things that will help everyone to get through this.
Carlin, could I have a personal consult on that, please?
Yes. I'm going to send you an accepting change mindfulness meditation tonight.
Great. Maybe an infusion of some new blood too, maybe.
Maybe send it to
Send it to everyone.
Maybe
And
send it-
also get outside while you still can and get to nature.
Maybe send that mindfulness to the full school committee too.
Okay, I will do that, Helen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carlin. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well, what can I say? Keep stay healthy. We don't have time to be sick.
No.
We don't.
Stay well, everybody.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks,
Bye.
Barbara.
Thanks, Barbara.
Buddy.
Thank you, Nicole and Ben and all the other people who participated.
Yeah, thanks
Thank you,
everyone for
everyone.
coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.